So, welcome to friends and fans from across the continent for another episode of Hockey Time Machine. Tonight, we go from the stage to the ice surface with puck rock. But before we do, I just want to extend condolences to the family and fans of George Armstrong, who we lost this week. George was the long-serving captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who died this week, and a real loss to the hockey world as well. So, we'll say our condolences and our blessings, and wish George a safe journey from here on in. Several people have made it possible to bring a Hockey Time Machine to you, and I want to mention some sponsors who helped bring us to all of you out there. So we want to thank Soho Hockey. We want to thank 100 Things Maple Leaf Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die by Paul Patskow and Mike Leonetti, available at better bookstores everywhere. And we also want to thank another sponsor, my latest book, Voices in Blue and White, Pride and Passion in the Maple Leafs, available solely at kevinsheahockey.com. Got the commercial stuff out of the way. Let's kind of get to the action now if we can. So, as I mentioned, tonight's theme is puck rock. Now, Rik Emmett has written a song called The Magic Power of Music, or he's written about it anyway, and how it unlocks memories and comforts us, empowers us. And hockey does the same thing, I've found. And tonight, we'll discuss the magic power of music and hockey with some outstanding guests. And I'm anxious to introduce you to Vince Gill, Berg, Dave Betts, Rik Emmett, Mark Holmes, and Tara Slone. So good news, bad news for us as well at this point. Vince Gill wanted to be with us live tonight. Something came up that he was unable to, unfortunately, and he's really quite an extraordinary guy, a remarkable musician, a great singer, great songwriter. Besides his own recording career, he's joined the Eagles over the last couple of years as well, but he's also recorded with Emmylou Harris and Rodney Crowell and Barbra Streisand and Eric Clapton, Amy Grant, who just happens to be his wife as well. So he's ubiquitous in the music industry these days, and just a great guy and a real hockey fan as well. So he's not able to join us, unfortunately, live anyway, and apologizes.
What's his team?
I had a chance to talk to him earlier, and here's our conversation.
Oh, cool.
So welcome to Hockey Time Machine, Vince, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Okay, I got to ask you, so how does a little boy growing up in Oklahoma ever dream about the incredible musical success that you're enjoying? You know, these 21 Grammy Awards and the Country Music Hall of Fame, Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. How do you ever dream about that kind of thing?
It's amazing what a kid will do to keep from having to study. He'll do his homework. I don't know that I had those dreams. I had a love for music that was apparent from day one with me, and music had always spoken to me in a deeper way than it probably does most people, and so I followed that muse and ran with it and was driven by it to an extent that I had no idea would take me down the path that it did.
You get signed as a solo artist, RCA, and that's where I first met you and really fell in love with the music of Vince Gill. That Turn Me Loose album in 84 was so great, and I still think back and play quite often things like Oklahoma Borderline. And so you did real well with RCA. You move over to MCA, and I just happened to be over there at the same time, and we enjoyed working your song When I Call Your Name, among others as well. So just a tremendous time. So all those studio albums, and brings us fairly close, I guess about a year ago when you put out Okie, which was a really special album. And I was pleasantly surprised when I purchased it from iTunes and listened to it, because it's intensely personal, and you weren't afraid to play some, or at least to write some challenging songs here. Can you tell me a little bit about your most recent album, Okie?
Well, I think, to me, a friend of mine said it's age appropriate. I'm 63 and about to turn 64, and he said, I don't think you could have written those songs at 20 years old, 30 years old, and I think he was right.
Yeah.
It took enough of the living of a life to gain perspective and to gain experience and gain wisdom and all those kinds of things. Not to say those songs are wise, but in the way that they're wise to me is in that the way they're, I guess, their intent is not to be judgmental. You can have a very difficult conversation about a difficult subject if you're not judgmental, and your point is not to make somebody, feel like their viewpoint is wrong or inadequate. Or, I just think if you have the conversation and tough subject, if everybody's respectful, you can have a great conversation.
Yeah, and you've done exactly that. A really, really terrific album. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your stint joining the Eagles, for goodness sake. And how did that come to pass? And I mean, we've all grown up with those Eagles songs, but to be standing on stage and playing them and singing them with some of your peers who you had listened to on record yourself or on radio yourself, can you tell me a little bit about the era of the Eagles as it continues on?
Well, I think that in my mind and in my philosophy of what makes them so great are their songs, and some amazing singers, some amazing musicians, all that's given and true, but the thing that sets them apart, makes them better than everybody else, is their songs. Their songs were just better. The Beatles songs were just better than everybody else's. And throughout time, the things that have great life and great legacy are great songs. They're timeless, and they never quit being great songs. And so, just I think in my life of doing everything I've done for the last 45 years plus, the fact that those guys thought enough of me to ask me to come and be a part of that band, in their greatest tragedy in losing Glenn was very powerful. It's not lost on me, and kind of a neat, I guess, end of in a sense, it's towards the end of a long career that I've had, and to have that validation by those folks to be thought enough of to be a part of it is pretty overwhelming. And then the other thing about it is I don't ever lose sight of the fact the only reason I'm getting to do it is because of the tragedy of the loss of Glenn.
Right.
He was an old friend of mine, and I never lose sight of that. So I don't consider myself an equal. I didn't have anything to do with their legacy of those great songs and those great records, but I do get to be a part of keeping those songs alive and singing those songs and playing those songs and carrying on what part I can play in that legacy of pretty much unsurpassed songwriting and record making.
It's quite amazing, and you fit in so nicely, and it's just a real tribute to you and the band to choose the right person to fill a significant role. But, on we go. So listen, we're here to talk about hockey. When you and I first met years and years ago, you talked at length about golf, and I know that you were a terrific golfer, but we never touched on hockey, surprisingly, and I want to know where your interest in hockey may have come from, Vince.
Well, you would think in Oklahoma we didn't even know how to make ice where I grew up. And as a kid, I was as big a sports junkie as I was music junkie. And I played all sports and was pretty good at sports and always a decent athlete. And so I always was drawn to it, And we had a hockey team called the Oklahoma City Blazers that was a CHL team.
Oh, yeah.
And we were the farm club of the Bruins, Boston Bruins.
Right.
And the Boston Bruins in the 60s were, the top of the mountain and one of the better teams and some of the better players. And so through the ranks of the farm team, we saw a lot of great hockey players that went on to do great things in hockey. And I just used, it was so simple. I just used to go to the games, as a little kid. And,
Wow.
And I love the sport. I think hockey is by far the most fun live sport you can go to.
Oh.
To see the speed that they have and the intensity and the end-to-end action. Basketball is nice, but they kind of waltz up and down the court, And football, they take time out and they wait 35 seconds to run the next play. And hockey, man, it's full tilt from the drop of the puck. They don't ever stop. And I just have always been drawn to the game. I love what I like most about the game is the lack of prima donnas, you know, and the lack of arrogance and, hey, notice me, notice me, notice me in the world of sports that we live in today. That's kind of hard to take sometimes, you know, when somebody does something and then they have to beat on their chest and scream as loud as they can. And in hockey, man, it's kind of an everyman, you know, team thing, and just like I love it. I just love it. And then when we finally got, you know, so I grew up with hockey in Oklahoma City and then left home, obviously, and didn't get to have anything to do with hockey again until the Predators came to town.
Right.
23 years ago. And what's funny is the guy that owned the team, Craig Leopold, he called me and said, hey, I've talked to a lot of people around town. I'm bringing this team to Nashville, and you're the only guy I'm going to ask to be a partner with me, and would you go in with me on this team? And I said, man, I can't. I'm going through a divorce at the time, and it didn't make any sense. And I said, but I'll do anything you could use, you know, to help promote the game and this and that. I said, I'll come to the games. I'll play in between periods, play music, sing anthems, whatever I can do to help. And so I did that. They put my face on billboards around town with no teeth, and I got tickets, and they were advertising the team. And so I started going to the games from day one and kind of part of their first fan, so to speak. And that's where my love of hockey. I don't know that much about it. You know, I'm not nuanced in every aspect of the game, and I don't know that, you know, I know a good forward from an average forward and a centerman from a great defense. You know, I just love the game and very novice in my knowledge of it.
You know, Nashville certainly wouldn't be a prime, in my mind anyway, a prime hockey market, but yet the team, the excitement that's around it has turned it into Smashville, and everybody tells me that you've got to see a game in Nashville. You will not believe it, but I understand that it's a real experience at the Bridgestone Arena when the Predators skate out there.
Yeah, it's big fun, you know. I remember when I first got a team. I'll never forget this. As I live, I was watching David Letterman one night, and he's on there, and he goes, well, it's just been brought to my attention that Nashville has an NHL team now. He says, that's amazing to me. He says, it'll be the first time in the history of hockey that the players have more teeth than the fans.
Oh, no. Jeez. Oh, jeez.
It's so funny. I think it's hysterical. But, it did take a while for everybody to kind of catch on to the game and the nuances of the game and all of that, and the real authenticity of a hockey crowd in Toronto versus, you know, the craziness and mayhem of maybe what a Nashville game is like. They're two different things.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say one's better than the other.
Right, sure.
Or more important than the other. It just kind of is what it is. So
exactly.
It's fun. It's a fun environment, you know.
So have you ever picked up a stick, put on some skates, and given it a try, Vince? Have you ever tried to play the game?
No. You know, when I was a kid, when I went to go watch the Blazers, every now and then after a game, they'd let you come rent some skates and go out there and skate around. And I could skate a little bit, but never very well.
Right.
But never enough to where I thought I could grab a stick and get out there. And I'm worth more off the ice, I think. One of my most embarrassing and greatest achievements was given the business to Todd Bertuzzi.
Oh.
I think he was playing with the Red Wings at the time.
Yeah.
And back in the day, you know, that my seats were right behind the goal on the glass, and they had a little bit of space in between the pieces of glass where you could yell whatever you wanted in between that glass, and they could hear you. Now it's all covered up, and you can't do it anymore. So they're taking my fun away from me. I was lighting Todd Bertuzzi up one night, just giving him the business, you know, wearing him out. And finally he looked at me, and, you know, and he kind of took both arms and invited me out on the ice.
Oh, jeez.
He just said, come on out, you know. And I started laughing at him. And I yelled, I can't skate. It's great fun.
Very good. Well, it's been great fun talking to you. This has been Wonderful. I've enjoyed every second of it, whether it be the music side, the hockey side, and just reconnecting after a number of years. Vince, thank you so much for joining us on Hockey Time Machine. And
yeah, if you make it this way, man, I got an extra seat. We'll go watch a game.
You've got a deal. I would love to do that at some point. Very good. The amazing Vince Gill, recorded earlier for Hockey Time Machine. And not the only person to talk about a passion for hockey who happens to be a recording artist. Want to bring Mo Berg up now and see if we can talk to Mo for a moment too about his passion for hockey too. So in the mid 80s, I can just remember sitting here in Toronto, and there was a song that was ubiquitous. It was called I'm an Adult Now, and it was everywhere. CFNY was the big modern rock station in the marketplace, but everybody was playing this song, and came out of nowhere. We didn't know what this band was all about. This guy from Edmonton who'd come in with this amazing song, and all of a sudden they get signed to Warner's on a singles deal, and next thing you know, it's a video and a song that's all over right across the country and into the U.S. as well. And for me, I'm a Windsor boy, and the guy who did the video, which was really kind of a grassroots video, but was a guy named Nelu Garand, who I knew from high school. And so I had an extra reason to love it. But you hear the song on the radio all the time. You see the video still all the time too. And really, really pleased now to talk to Mo Berg. Mo, tell us how this Edmonton boy all of a sudden ended up in Toronto and where this song came from.
Well, I mean, I guess I always wanted to be, rock star, whatever. And there was no possibility of that ever happening in Edmonton. I mean, there was no infrastructure for that time. There wasn't even barely any place to like play your own music. I mean, fortunately, like I was part of the punk rock scene there, and so there was a whole cottage industry around punk rock. But otherwise, there was no sort of normal place where like we could maybe get a gig at some hotel bar when they were slumming it on a Tuesday night, and they'd have like a punk night or something. So that was it. I was like, there was nothing I could do, and so I thought, well, I'm gonna go to Toronto. That's my only shot at it. Yeah, and so then once I got to Toronto, things actually happened, relatively quickly. I met Nelu. I'd known Nelu actually from Edmonton, and he lived there for a while. And so then we hooked back up again in Toronto, and we'd made some demos in a basement studio. And we said, well, which one of these songs do you think we should make a video of? And he said, oh, what about this one? It was I'm an Adult. And I had no idea, because the whole thing was just dumb luck, And so we made this video, and yeah, kind of the rest is history.
Boy, oh boy. Well, it spawned all kinds of things. I mean, you get a record deal ultimately, but all of a sudden, the amazing Todd Rundgren is producing your first two albums. How did that come to pass, Mo?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were always kind of real fans, so we were kind of touring around, and we'd gotten signed to Chrysalis Records, their New York office, and so we were sort of playing some shows in the States, and we didn't even have our record out yet. We were just kind of playing shows, and then we ended up in the New York office and had a meeting. And they said, "Who do you want to produce your record?" And I said, "Well, how about Todd Rundgren?" Because he was my favorite producer. He was, kind of a hero of mine. And I just kind of said it like, "This is never going to happen." But why not just say it? And I kind of forgot about it actually. And then we kind of got back in our van and played a few more shows, and then headed back into Canada. I was in Winnipeg. Winnipeg was our first show back in Canada, and we were at sound check, and someone said, "Hey, there's a phone call for you." And I said, oh, okay. And I went to the phone. I said, hello. And he goes, hey, Mo, it's Todd Rundgren. Oh, what a moment. I mean, can you imagine the person you admire most in the world just calls you up on the telephone? So anyway, so he calls and he said, hey, I'm be interested in working on producing the record. But, it's like, we got to do something about that guitar player. He's terrible. And I said, well, I'm the guitar player. He said, man, you got to hit the woodshed. You got to really start practicing and stuff. So anyway, so I said, but we were on the road. I was too busy. I was drinking, chasing girls. I had no time to practice. And so we get to the studio. He threw every effect on it that he had in the whole studio, my solos, and to try and gussy them up a bit and make them so they weren't quite so boring. So yeah, it was an amazing experience working with him. He's a great producer, a super intelligent, brilliant guy. And yeah, had a lot of great, drunken conversations after the studio.
I can only imagine. Well, that first album goes platinum in Canada, and he also produced your second album too, One Sided Story, and those songs again still live on the radio on a regular basis, and it's wonderful to hear. 5 studio albums at all, and then I guess for some of our American friends who maybe didn't know a whole lot about the band, hearing Cigarette Dangles on Beavis and Butthead had to be had to be quite interesting for them. How did that come to pass, Mo?
I have no idea. I mean, I was kind of as surprised as anybody else. It's like, well, we just kind of started watching the show, and I think we were in Atlanta. We just played a gig, some festival or something, and we turned on Beavis and Butthead, and there it was. It was just kind of there, and it's like I think I'd had some vague idea that they might have shot something around it, but no one said it's going to be on tonight, and this is it. And so yeah, I was just as shocked as anybody.
Very, very cool. So the Pursuit of Happiness inducted members to the Canadian Indies Hall of Fame. And Mo, you're at the center of that and should be very, very proud of yourself as well. Another band who we heard a great deal of in the 1980s was Honeymoon Suite. I can remember picking up a Q107 homegrown album. And there was a track there called New Girl Now that was pretty special. A little different than the one I heard later on. But what ended up happening is that Honeymoon Suite gets signed to WEA, Warner Electra Atlantic, where I happened to work at that time. And Dave Betts, a member of Honeymoon Suite. Dave, maybe you can tell me about joining the band in, I guess, around 1983 or so, and the path that you took to ultimately go through Q107 in relative terms to finally get your debut album recorded and released.
Well, you nailed it right on the head. It was 1983, and in those days, Honeymoon Suite was a bar band. It was a cover band. And our manager at the time was also an agent. So we were able to be working 6 nights a week all over Ontario, Southern Ontario specifically. And the demo that they made, that they submitted to Q107, was actually recorded before I joined the band. So the drummer at that time was a guy named Mike Langell, who used to play in the Diodes, actually. And he was a great drummer. But unfortunately, things didn't work out. And I knew Derry Graham, the guitar player, and so I was lucky enough to get in the band and do some shows. And as Mo says, it's a lot about timing. It's a lot about being at the right place at the right time. Perhaps with the right look and the right songs, and et cetera, et cetera. And we were just lucky to do one at the Q107 Homegrown. We won it, and we won the Canadian National Homegrown Contest. And we assigned us very quickly. And we were lucky to get picked up by Warner Brothers in the United States. And our video that we was not happy to make, quite frankly, did very, very well on MTV for us. And so that opened up that market for us, too. And so, things started to get better and better for us, and things went well eventually.
Boy, did it ever. That debut album just burst out of the blocks, I guess I should say, to use a sports acronym. And New Girl Now, which had been re-recorded with slightly different lyrics, and Burning in Love, and then it just went on and on. The songs were all over the radio. Bad Attitude through time. Feel It Again. What Does It Take was in One Crazy Summer, a film that many of us may have seen. Love Changes Everything. And then recorded the title track for the film Lethal Weapon as well. You guys toured incessantly over the 1980s as well. Jethro Tull and Heart and ZZ Top. Tell me about the blur, Dave, of touring through this time, hearing your songs on the radio, getting awarded gold and platinum albums as you go along.
Well, as everyone here can relate to, it's always bizarre to hear your song on the radio, especially if you are far from home. If you're in Europe or in the US, it's always, that's interesting. So, and it was a blur, and you are a bit, I mean, the music industry being what it is, it's like, let's get you, here today, and hopefully you're not gone later this afternoon. And so we did a lot of touring, and we did a lot of opening acts. So we toured a lot, and actually getting to a hockey reference, we played a lot of these hockey arenas that I had seen growing up. And so, and I remember being intimidated when we played Philadelphia, not the Spectrum, and that was a big deal. But we played, as I say, A to Z, everyone from Bryan Adams and Aerosmith to ZZ Top and many acts in between. And a lot of these, for us, which was very nice, were at big hockey arenas, the LA Forum and the Montreal Forum as well. So it was a whirlwind, as everyone here can relate to. And you just try to do the best you can, and hopefully you can catch a shooting star while it's going, and things will continue to happen for you.
You were with the band until 1991, moved into a whole different side of things, the business side of the music industry for a little while, rejoined the band, I guess probably about 13 or 14 years ago, still playing with them now. Tell me what it's like to be back with the boys and playing the songs again and playing some new music as well, Dave.
Well, a lot less pressure, that's for sure. So it's a lot of fun, and it's mostly what we refer to as weekend warrior work. So you see Mark out on the road sometimes, and he can relate to this too. So you hop on a plane on Thursday and fly out to wherever, and then you come home Sunday night, and then you do it again the next weekend. And so we're lucky enough that we're in the genre of music where you can play festivals and casinos and the occasional theater and some bars, and the crowd is an older crowd and that grew up in the 70s and 80s, boomers, I suspect, and they're great, and the guys are great. We get along very well. The crowds are wonderful. The people are so nice, and so I can't complain at all. I love it, and sadly we're not playing right now, but I miss it, and hopefully we'll get back before the end of the year.
The stereotypical radio question, so please bear with me here, but do you ever get tired of playing New Girl Now or Burning in Love or one of those early hits that you've played so many times, or is it just a thrill every time, Dave?
Well, no, you don't get tired. And yeah, you try to, what you're doing is you're trying to pretend that you just wrote the song, 3 hours before and playing it with that same attitude. But no, I don't. I try to play it well every time. And we're lucky. I mean, I don't listen to a lot of 80s music at all, but I like our stuff. So I don't have an issue with playing our music, and I don't get tired of it yet.
Fantastic, Dave. Thank you very much. Going to move over to Rik Emmett now. Now, Rik, you were already a playing musician when a guy named Mike Levine, who was a bass player, played some keyboards as well, and a drummer and vocalist by the name of Gill Moore found you playing somewhere and invited you to join their band back in the mid-1970s. Can you tell me about those early days of joining Triumph and finding your way as a record deal burgeoned and all of a sudden you started to go on tour and release records and things of that sort?
Well, when they first approached me, I was just playing in a bar band, and they already had like a record contract with Attic Records, and they didn't even have a guitar player, but they made a demo and with a guitar player named Freddie Keeler, and they had a giant trucks to with all this gear because Gill had sort of been running a PA business out of his garage. So they really, and Mike had worked doing sort of marketing and radio promo for an independent label called Hopi. So anyways, they were very experienced and they sure could talk a good game. And it was kind of like, hey, Rik, we need somebody to front the band to kind of, give us some kind of musical credibility or whatever, So it was like they were saying, you'll be our chief songwriter guy, and so come on, let's do this thing. So anyhow. But the big thing, Kevin, was really they offered me $175 a week whether they played a gig or not. And I wanted to move out and move in with my girlfriend. So I said, $175 a week, I'm in. So that's how it started. And Attic came and saw us play, I think it was at the Nob Hill Tavern in Toronto at, about maybe 2 months in or 3 months in. And they said, okay, you got to get in the studio. You got to make us a record right away. So, and it happened relatively quickly, but I mean, as any of these people can tell you, you're sort of on a roller coaster, and the first few years, you're working really, really hard, and you're constantly out on the road, and it's just like a blur, sort of. So it didn't really slow down until about 1980, 81. So those first 6 years. It was quite a blur. It was great, and we were making like an album, not quite an album a year, so it was something.
It sure was. You've got to explain to me and to our viewers as well the unusual spelling of Rik, R-I-K Emmett, as opposed to R-I-C-K. There's got to be a story, Rik.
Yeah, I've told it a few times. Levine had borrowed money off me on the road, cash. And so when he paid me back, he wrote me a personal check, and he'd spelled my name R-I-C on the check. And so then he phones me one day and he says, I'm doing album credits for the first album. I just want to make sure I've got everything right. And I said, well, I hope you put a K on the end of my name. It's not R-I-C. There's a K on the end, which of course R-I-C-K. But no, Mike submits the stuff and Abbott prints up, I don't know, 10,000, 15,000 jackets or something. And it's like, now I'm R-I-K. Now I'm Scandinavian. And I go, whatever. It's just rock and roll. It's just showbiz. That's fine. I'll be R.I.K. And, in the end, it's kind of like, you got Sting and you've got Alice Cooper and Madonna. And so R.I.K. sort of became, okay, that's the guy that I inhabit when I go out on stage and when I play gigs and stuff. I'm that guy, R.I.K. But, of course, my mom, when she would send, birthday cards or something, I was never R.I.K. I was always R.I.C.K. And then here's the other kicker. Everybody that ever went to high school with me, I was always Richard. So when I see people from, that knew me in 1969, they go, hey, Richard, how's it going? I go, oh, fine. I must have gone to high school with you then.
Oh, boy. Well, okay, so the first few years, the songs that were on the radio, mostly written by you and performed by you, Hold On, Lay It on the Line from 1979. A couple years later, Magic Power, Fight the Good Fight. You're touring like crazy. And there was a real groundswell of fandom in the southern U.S. as well. Texas specifically, you get the chance to play the US Festival in San Bernardino, but also Texas Jam. And some of the guys that you were playing with, you were playing with, US Festival was Van Halen and Ozzy and Judas Priest, Scorpions, Motley Crue. There you are right in there with Triumph as well. And then Texas Jam, Sammy Hagar, Styx, Uriah Heep, Ted Nugent, all the guitar gods and all the harder side of music as well. And there you are on stage rocking, I was going to say tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of fans too. Tell us about that experience, Rik, please.
Well, you just covered a lot of territory there, Kev. Geez, okay, US Festival, to me, it was just another gig, honestly, truthfully. Memorial Day weekend, 1983. And they were doing all of these days. There was like Country Day and a New Wave Day or whatever. And so the Rock Day, we were playing in the middle of the afternoon. But then you find out it's not really like just another gig because there's a helicopter to fly you in. And you go, okay, this is different. This is obviously going to be different. And then you get backstage and you see the Van Halen compound. And, there's Valerie Bertinelli walking with her girlfriends over to, so it was different. It was clearly, and there were like 250,000 people there, and that's a modest. There was human flesh as far as my eye could see when I got out on stage. So it was surreal. It was weird, but I just thought, hey, they got cameras here, and they're filming. I better sing good. I better play good. I better not run around too much and make sure that my pitch is all right. So. Yeah. So, when I did that Texas Jam thing, that was we did a jam during Sammy's set. I got up and played Whole Lot of Love with Sammy and Ted, and we did that both nights at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas and at the Astrodome in Houston. But that Astrodome gig, that was the night that Tommy Shaw of Styx kind of quit the band, literally threw his guitar down in disgust. And left the stage as Dennis DeYoung was sort of forcing the band to play that Dr. Roboto thing, which on a hard rock show, come on, like people that have been sitting through Ted and us and stuff, it was they should have stuck to their working man kind of material, Anyhow, there's a million stories.
Well, and we've covered a couple, but we'll get to a few more. The sales were incredible. You had a double platinum album, 3 platinum albums, 4 gold in Canada. US was a platinum album and 3 gold as well. So the sales certainly followed the airplay and followed the touring of the band as well. I guess I should step back. 1990, you step out and go solo and put out a great album called Absolutely, the first of your 10 solo albums. Beautiful song, one of Heartbreaks, one of my favorites. Another one was a rocker called Saved by Love. Had to take a lot for you to leave such a successful band. Rik, what prompted the move to go solo?
I wanted to do a national promo tour with Kevin Shea as my bouncer.
You and thousands of others, Rik. Jeez.
Yeah. No, the thing about Triumph was that it was a kind of a narrow focus musical thing, and I just wanted to do different things. I wanted to eventually, I ended up making 3 albums that were sort of mainstreamish, hoping to get on radio kind of records. And then I realized I didn't even want to do this anymore. And so I started my own indie label, and I just started putting out records that I wanted to make, classical guitar records. And, my career sort of has followed an arc now, Kevin, where I'm at the point where I make jazz records. And the latest thing I've done is written a book of poetry. So I'm trying to find the smaller the market that I can possibly find, because I don't really care about the commercial aspect of things. And it sounds funny to be, a guy that was in a rock band that, I was jumping around between the flash pots and wearing spandex jumpsuits and all the rest. But, you just get older. Vince Gill, when he talked about making a record for, a grown man and making grown-up music, like that was starting to happen to me in the mid-'90s, but I'm a little older than Vince. So, like, I'm turning 68 on my next birthday, so I got a few years on him. But Vince Gill, he did a tour with like Lyle Lovett and a couple of guys like that. And the tour manager is a guy that I trained, like, to be a road manager. And so, that's something that Vince and I have in common. So anyhow, I've been around a while. I don't make commercial music anymore.
I'm worried about this arc that you talked about, Rik, from the stages with hundreds of thousands of people to going out on your own and getting some radio play and then playing jazz and playing other kinds of music and then writing now Hockey Time Machine. But anyway, all good. Thank you, Rik. 2008, Canadian Music Hall of Fame with Triumph. 2019, inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. 2019, you did something really special, an invite-only event. You guys got together and played 3 songs, and I guess later on this year, it's scheduled for a film documentary about Triumph as well. So we look forward to these things and many more over the next little while. Thank you, Rik. We'll be back to you in just a few minutes' time.
All right.
But I do want to talk to Mark for a second. Mark Holmes of Platinum Blonde. We talked about songs exploding onto the airwaves, and it was the same sort of thing in 1984 when all of a sudden this really unique song came on the radio. It had a great hook to it, had a great melody, but there was also this kind of spoken word thing to it, and It Doesn't Really Matter all of a sudden was everywhere on rock radio. Standing in the Dark shortly thereafter as well. That opening album was one of the great debut albums in Canadian music history. Mark, tell us about going from playing the bars and doing some cover songs to all of a sudden becoming a recording act with CBS Records.
Well, a bit like the Honeymoon Suite story I just heard. Just kind of wanted to maybe play some bars around and stuff like that, and travel. And we didn't expect it to be like, I didn't expect it to be massive. I kind of did, but nobody else did. So it was interesting time. Of course, MTV came out at the same time, and we were on television a lot. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, and a huge debut album, 300,000 copies, so triple platinum in Canada. You talked about Much Music and the role they played, and Video of the Year. You were up for a Juno nomination for that. The Breakthrough Group of the Year. It was a pretty special year for Platinum Blonde. You add another player. You add Kenny McLean the next year and release Alien Shores, and what an album that turned out to be. 300,000 copies seems extraordinary and hard to
500,000, mate.
For Alien Shores, right? Yeah, but 300,000 for the debut album. All of a sudden,
yeah.
That and sells 500,000 copies in Canada, and a number one song with Crying Over You as well. Maybe you can talk about adding Kenny to the band, God rest his soul, and the whirlwind that was Platinum Blonde at that time, making the little girls squirm and squeal. And
I like to scream. What was Squeam? Not that one.
Okay, it was me. I'll be honest with you. Then there we go.
I felt fortunate. You asked me what it was like. It was kind of like being in the Beatles. I mean, girls were screaming like mad, and every time we finished the song, we basically had to plug our ears because it was so loud. And pretty much everywhere we played, every arena, even stadiums we played, the music was just barely over, making its way over the top of the screaming crowd. It was an amazing time for us. And then when Kenny, you see, when I first came over, I saw this band called the Deserters, and I was their groupie. I must have gone to every show I could find, and Kenny was one of the players. So when that band sort of fell apart, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a friend, fellow Brit, and maybe a drinking buddy to go on the road with, and because I was always such an admirer of his, and he was an absolutely magnificent song contributor. He whatever song we were working on, he just stepped right in and come up with something. And it was a really sweet and amazing time of my life, and I miss him dearly. I think about him all the time. And when we got back together, I decided to play bass instead of getting a bass. But we had a bass for a little while. It didn't work out. I just didn't think anybody could really replace Kenny at that time. Good times. But I do have one little story I wanted to tell you when Rik was talking. Rik, so I was over for, I can't remember what it was, just for a little while, and there was this sale going on. I saw it in the Toronto Star, and they were selling all this stuff. And one of the things they were selling was a white Gibson SG. I think it had 3 humbucking pickups in it, man. I cherished that guitar until it was stolen out of my car somewhere in the north of England somewhere, along with my amps and everything. But that was your guitar, Rik. that was a Gibson.
Do you remember that, Rik?
I absolutely cherished it. And it's been gone out of my life for so long, but seeing your face and listening to you talk, I thought I had to bring that up. Sorry, I had to bring that up.
Well, that's great.
One of my first real guitars that I ever had. And thank you, Rik. I'm such a fan.
That's all right. I love it when you hear a story and the guitar has found a nice home with somebody that appreciated it.
I love it. In fact, maybe you'll remember the guy who sold it to me was he ran Metalworks Studio for a while. I don't remember his name. Abernathy.
Alexander Necky, yeah.
Alexander Necky, that's it. Yeah, he's
still around. I think Alex still works out of the Metalworks school there now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to make the first album at Metalworks, is because I met him, and through him, that's how I got the guitar. He sold it, but I think I just
right on. That's great. That's a good story. Nice.
Well, another album in 1987 called Contact. There was a great cover version of the old Ohio Players track called Fire. Just a little bit different, but boy, was it funky and good. Rocked out as well. 2010, Mark, you and the boys are inducted into the Canadian Music and Broadcast Industry Hall of Fame, and certainly the legacy of Platinum Blonde continues on. Thank you, Mark. We'll come back to you in just another few moments as well, but I'm going to ask Tara Slone to step up for a moment now and talk to Tara for a moment's time. Tara, things kind of took a bit of a turn for you. You had thought about being an opera singer, but ended up playing in a band called Joydrop, which was anything but opera. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your music journey that brought us to Joydrop. And maybe Tara's had to step away for a moment's time, so we'll come back.
You know what? No, here's the.
There we are. Sorry about
that. You would think I would know how to do this by now, but no, I did have to step away to deal with my daughter, but I'm back.
Perfect. So I wanted to ask you about going from the dreams of being an opera singer to a band like Joydrop, which was a terrific band signed to Tommy Boy. How did that come to pass, Tara?
Well, I did concentrate on opera and classical voice until university, and that's when I realized I really didn't have the discipline to stick with that. And I'm kind of grateful because it's a brutally hard business to get into. I left school in Nova Scotia. I decided to move to Montreal. I went to theater school and then ended up in Toronto. And I always loved rock music. I worked at Sam the Record Man all through high school, but I really didn't think I could sing it. You know, I was trained to sing in my head voice, but I gave it a shot. And I looked in the back of Now magazine. I was looking for some musical soulmates, and there was an ad asking for a rock goddess, and I thought, okay, well, maybe that can be me. And so I went to Cherry Beach Studios, and I guess the guys would say they auditioned me, but I auditioned them. They already had the name picked out. They had the song Beautiful, which ended up being our very first single, and I fell in love immediately. And it was a whirlwind. I really had no idea about the music business whatsoever, but they had all been in bands before. They kind of knew the lay of the land. They had a manager in place. They had a producer to do our demos. And so I think within 7 months of me joining the band, we ended up getting a record deal with Tommy Boy Records, which was primarily a hip hop label, but they were branching into the world of rock. So they were the biggest indie label in the States at the time. And thus our journey began.
How did they discover you? Did you send demos to them? Were they auditioning club shows that you were playing? How did that come to pass?
We sent out demos, and we played a whole bunch of showcases. We played a bunch of showcases in Canada, and nobody was biting. And then we went down to New York. We actually had an opening slot for the band Dog Star, which was Keanu Reeves' band, at the Supper Club in Midtown New York. And like 20 record companies showed up, and we talked to several of them and decided to go with Tommy Boy. It was that time, it was the late 90s. It sort of was the last hurrah, I think, of the money flowing in record labels. So we signed a nice deal, a nice publishing deal. It happened all of a sudden.
Perfect. Sharing a roster with Naughty by Nature and House of Pain. And there's
Coolio. Don't forget Coolio.
Exactly. Great stuff. Well, a couple of years later, you released a great track called Sometimes Wanna Die. And it included Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, your partner there, from Tommy Lee to Ron McLean. We'll talk about that shortly. But how did Tommy Lee ever get recruited to join your video?
I mean, it was just one of those rock and roll things. Like, our director knew his manager. I was actually kind of opposed to the idea. Tommy had some bad press, and I was concerned about it. But the record company convinced me that it would be a good idea. And it really came down to Tommy just loved the song. And I really fell in love with him. The first time I met him was on set, and we didn't make out, but I mean, the scenes were kind of intimate. We're like, he was my boyfriend in the video. And he was lovely to work with, and just a big kid. He loved the song, and that's essentially how it went down.
Perfect. A Juno Award nomination for Best New Group in 2002. Time goes on, and we see Tara Slone in Rockstar In Excess as they look for a new lead singer there. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll preface it by saying, we were one of the many rock and roll casualties of a couple of things. Sometimes Wanna Die, interestingly, was pulled off the radio after 9/11. So we had quite a trajectory going. It did really well in Canada, was starting to chart in the States, and then the rug got pulled out. They took anything with death or flying connotations off the air. So that happened, and then our record company folded, and that was that. So I was at a loss, for a couple of years. What was I going to do? I started writing with other producers and songwriters and doing my own music. And then the INXS show, I didn't audition for it. Actually, a big fan of Joydrop, who was also a big fan of INXS, wrote them on my behalf and said, I know this woman who I think would be great. So they actually contacted me. I did eventually, I went to the final round of auditions. So I guess I was in the top 50, and then ultimately made the top, 16. it was insane. It was like being on the Truman Show. We didn't have any clocks. We didn't have any newspapers. We didn't have any computers. We didn't have any TVs. We were completely isolated. Our phone calls were monitored. Signed a $3 million non-disclosure agreement, which I presume I'm breaking right now, but whatever. It's been a long time. Yeah, I mean, I actually, in retrospect, I found it kind of a traumatic experience. It's like that becomes your world. It's very, very small, but it's like your mission is to survive, and sort of it feels like life and death. So I made it about 5 weeks in and came back to Canada, but it really was that show that opened the doors to television, because a lot of outlets started calling me to do recaps for Rockstar the weeks after I was kicked off the show. So I do credit it for kind of kickstarting my TV career, but it did nothing for my music career.
Well, that's interesting, though. I didn't realize the segue was quite like that. You move out to Calgary ultimately, and are the co-host of Breakfast Television, and did that for about 5 years. Talk to us a little bit about the TV experience and how that related to your previous, I guess you were still singing, but your previous.
Well, I lost you for a second, Kev, but I hopefully you guys can still hear me. So I came back from Rockstar in Excess. I put out a solo album, which I loved so much, and it sold like 2 copies. And I have to admit, I was disheartened and tired. I think the push is difficult, and constantly promoting yourself is hard. And I just felt like I needed, just the universe was telling me I needed to find something different. And again, the TV doors had sort of opened. I took a chance. I applied to a job at a small station in Toronto called Sun TV. So I really learned on the job. I got it. I hosted, produced, I wrote. And then from there was offered a job hosting breakfast television in Calgary. That's something I did for 5 years. And it is literally the opposite of being in a rock band. I was up at 3 a.m. I was at work at 4 a.m. It's a very punishing schedule, but it's like the marathon of TV shows. You're on the air for 3.5 hours live every day. So I feel like, it was a tremendous learning experience. And then, I moved into hockey full time. So the rest, as they say, is history, still evolving, I guess.
An amazing history at that. Thank you, Tara. Well, Mo, I'm going to go back to you, Mo Berg from The Pursuit of Happiness. Let's really delve into the whole hockey side of things as well. Tell me a little bit about your hockey background, Mo. When you were out in Edmonton, there sure is no deficit of ice out there, no lack of ice out there. Were you a hockey player? Were you a hockey fan? Tell me about where your passion for hockey came from, Mo.
Well, I guess I was a hockey fan first and foremost. I was a hockey fan from a very early age. My brother was a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and so I was a 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid. He was watching Hockey Night in Canada, and the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was just like I didn't even know what it was. Maybe it was the uniforms, it was something, but all of a sudden I was a Chicago Blackhawks fan. So I was a die-hard Chicago Blackhawks fan, and I have been for my entire life, which has been, quite honestly, up until 2010, a completely miserable experience. And so, and my, one of my earliest memories was in, I guess it was 1970, 71. I was just a kid, but they went to the final against the Montreal Canadiens. And it was Chicago had finished first, and so they were in. They had sort of home ice advantage, and so Chicago took the first 2 games. Montreal took the next 2 games. Chicago took the 3rd game. Montreal took the third. Not the 3rd game, the 5th game, and Chicago took the 5th game. Montreal took the 6th game. So it's Game 7 in Chicago. As a kid, I'm thinking they're winning the Stanley Cup. And then, of course, Henri Richard scores the winning goal. And I cried. I cried so hard. I went upstairs into my mom's bedroom, and I kicked her closet door and just broke it. And it remained broken for the rest of the time that we had that house. It was like the biggest loss I'd ever had in my whole life. It just completely destroyed me. And then it was just like decades of that. Up until 2010. And
well, they certainly did turn a corner then, but did you have some favorite players back then, guys that you really followed? And how about now? Do you still follow the team as
I still follow the team, and I definitely followed them. You know, I guess I got a tiny bit disenchanted with the team over the last few years. It's been a struggle being a Chicago Blackhawks fan during the Bill Wirtz years. It just seemed like that, you know, there was no real interest in winning. They'd have little moments where, you know, they get a good team. There's that sort of, you know, Jeremy Roenick, Chris Chelios, Larmer kind of team, and that, you know, went to the finals against Pittsburgh and got swept. And so, you know, I guess I kind of stuck with them, and that's kind of how things are. It's funny, my son started watching the Toronto Raptors the year that they won the championship, and so then last year, you know, when they lost in the playoffs, he was just completely devastated. I said, buddy, this is sport. Like, this has been my whole life, watching the Chicago Blackhawks. You know, just constant disappointment every single year, and that's kind of how that's sport. That's kind of how sport is.
Have you ever met any of your heroes along the way?
Well, funny, I met Wayne Gretzky, and I mean, I'm from Edmonton, and so the Oilers were like a big deal to me. And, you know, when the Oilers were the Oilers, that was kind of, you know, it made it transform the city. And so anyway, I'd written the song Gretzky Rocks, and we released it as a single, and we had a picture disc of it. And so anyway, my friend Cam Carpenter, who I'm sure everybody here knows, I'm sure you know, definitely you know, Kevin.
Sure.
And he was working at the time for the Hard Rock Cafe. And so, which also owned or managed or something Wayne Gretzky's restaurant. So one day Cam called me up and said, "Wayne's in the restaurant. Come on down." And so he said, "Bring the record. Bring Gretzky's Gretzky Rocks with you." And so anyway, so I go down to Gretzky's restaurant, and I go there, and Gretzky's there, and he's there with, I think, was he with Colin Campbell? He was with somebody, like someone from the Players Association. I'm not sure who was. And, you know, just whatever. He's having dinner there, and there's tons of people, and everybody wants to meet Wayne, and no one's getting anywhere near him. And so me and Cam, you know, just had a drink, and we're just hanging out and talking. And at a certain point, it sort of feels like it's just not going to happen. And so I said, you know, and Cam says, "I don't know if this is going to happen." I said, "I don't know if it's going to happen either." And, you know, whatever, that's cool, you know. And so anyway, then the manager of the restaurant comes up and says, "Hey, Mo," and she's like a fan of Pursuit of Happiness. So she goes, "Hey, Mo, you want to meet Wayne?" Like, just like that, just as I'm about to leave the restaurant. And so anyway, she said, "Let's go." And then she just, like, through all these masses of people, she just drags me right up to Wayne. And it's like Wayne's eating. And everybody here knows that's the unwritten rule. You never go up to someone when they're trying to eat their dinner. You just don't do it. And so she brings me right up to Wayne, and she goes, "Hey, Wayne, it's Mo Berg." And I said, "Hey, Wayne," and I said, "I'm a huge fan," and I kind of put my hand out to shake his hand, and he shook my hand, and I said, "Hey, I wrote this song about you," and I had the 45, the picture disc 45, and a CD with a song on it. I reached into my bag to get it, and then the two goons that were with him all of a sudden just jumped up in front of me and put their hands up like this, and I'm like, "Oh, fuck!" And then I'm just like, I just took them out of my bag and put them on the table, and I just walked away. And that was kind of that was it. That was it. I was so freaked out about the whole thing, and I was like, "Oh boy." Yeah.
Did you ever hear back
yes, I met him.
that he knew of the song, that he listened to the song, that he liked the song? Did you ever hear, Mo?
We never got that far in the conversation, unfortunately, and I never saw him again. So,
Oh. How about from Chicago? Did you meet any of the Blackhawks along the way?
well, yeah, I there's a guy in town named, you probably know him, Bruce Barker. And he was he got me in to see one time when the Hawks were rehearsing. Yeah, I'm a musician. They were having a practice at Maple Leaf Gardens when they were going to play the Leafs that night. And so anyway, he brought me down, and I got to watch, you know, practice, and very much like watching a sound check, I guess. And then I there I am with Bobby Hull. Yeah, that was another thing. This is a completely different story. Where Cam Carpenter again got me into the 75th anniversary of the NHL, and they had this big event, and there's Bobby, and he's like trying to get me to smoke a cigar the whole time. I got loaded, and I met Bobby, and like Hans, like every big hockey player you can imagine, I met that night. It was pretty cool. But Bart's got me in to see them, and I got Eric Weinrich was playing defense for the Hawks at the time, and so Bart's introduced me to him, and he signed one of his sticks for me, and then Roenick was on the team. Jeremy Roenick was saying, and so Bart said, "Hey, you want to get Jeremy Roenick to sign it?" I said, "Yeah, no kidding." And so anyway, so Bart, so he said, "Hey, Jeremy, will you sign the stick for Mo?" And so Jeremy grabs the stick without looking at me, signs it without looking at me, and just hands it back to me without looking at me. And it was kind of like, so I can't honestly say I met Jeremy Roenick. I did meet Eric Reimer, who was an awesome, awesome guy. And I still have the stick. I could just walk upstairs right now and grab it.
Very cool. Thank you, Mo. So great. Dave Betts, Honeymoon Suite. Boy, oh boy. I want to find out where you found your passion for hockey. You and I have gone to a couple games together, and boy, you know your stuff. Where did you find this passion back in the day, Dave?
Well, first of all, how do I follow Mo? I mean, good
I know.
How do I follow that? Though I have a Bruce Barker story for you too that I'll follow up with.
You bet.
My upbringing was probably different than most people. My family weren't really into hockey. So we weren't, Saturday night, we didn't sit in front of the TV watching the Leafs. My parents would indulge at playoff time. So they would watch the playoff, they would watch the World Series, but that was it for sports. So, I remember when the Leafs won the last cup, which, there's not many of us left these days. And then, but I specifically remember what really turned me on was 2 years. One was 1969. And Kev, you might remember this, when they played Boston in the playoffs. And the first game they went to the Boston Garden, and it was the infamous Pat Quinn hit on Bobby Orr. And I was watching that. I was 11 or 12. I think I was 11 at the time. And I was blown away. And he got in the penalty box, and people are throwing beer at him, and he's up there with his stick swinging at people. Oh, my God. And then, later on, there was a big brawl. Do you remember this, Kevin? And there was, and I remember one of the fans, one of the Boston Bruins fat-ass beer belly fans, reached over the glass and started punching one of the Leafs. And I couldn't, so I could not believe. Of course, the Leafs did so well that night. I think they lost 11-0.
11-0, right.
And then they lost the next night 10-0. So they were better. And anyway, so that turned me on to the Leafs. I always loved the uniform. Like most said, the uniform grabs you. 70, 71 is when I really turned into it. I remember again when they played the Rangers in the playoffs that year, and that's the infamous, do you remember the Bernie Perrant mask being chucked into the crowd?
Vic Hadfield.
Yes. Was it? Yes, it was Vic Hadfield. Yeah, and it was, again, big brawls and all that. And I remember just climbing the walls. I was freaking out. So I have been suffering as a Leaf fan. I mean, Mo talked about the Hawks, but I remember the Hawks, killing the Leafs for years. They're a fantastic team. And actually, the Hawks were my second favorite team for many years, and from Tony Esposito, who was the coolest goalie, I thought. But the Leafs I've been suffering forever. They haven't even been back to the finals since '67. So the Leafs have been my team. I've been sort of, I'm not as much of a puckhead as I was back then, but I'm still following the Leafs.
Did you play when you were a kid? Did you sign up for minor hockey?
No. My parents, that was a no-go. My dad was like, if you think I'm going to get up and take you to practice at 6 a.m., you've got another thing coming. Right. And so, I wished I did, but I never was allowed to. And I eventually, I played with friends like in rec league on Saturday nights or Wednesday nights at midnight sort of thing. So I did that for quite a while. I was never really very good, but I loved it. And it was good enough for me.
I asked Mo this question. Let me ask the same of you. Have you met any of your heroes along the way, guys who were big fans of Honeymoon Suite, or guys that you just happened to run into some kind of serendipitous way?
Well, I have met some players. I don't know whether they're fans or not. Bruce Barker, again, introduced me to some players. And my Bruce Barker story, not as good as Mo's, but it was one time, I don't even remember Bruce as a broadcaster, but he was also, for a short time, he worked for Easton Sports. Do you remember that?
Yes, I sure do. Yeah.
He was a sales rep.
Yeah.
And one time he calls me up and says, I'm going down to Maple Leaf Gardens. The Leafs are playing the Canadiens tonight. Come down with me to practice. And so I'm like, yeah, okay. And so I go down and we get there just as the Leafs are finishing. I remember seeing Al Secord skating around like, oh, wow. And so I was down there, and all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder, and it's Guy Kinnear. Do you remember old Leaf trainer Guy Kinnear? Yeah. And he goes, you, out. And like, he goes, Mr. Ballard wants you out. Get out. And some of the reporters and other people there, well, he's just with Bruce Barker, and I don't care. Mr. Ballard wants him out. Get out. So I had to leave. I had to go wait in the hallway for Bruce, and I ended up chatting with some of the players, Wendell Clark, of course, and Russ Courtnall, and players like that at the time. But that's my Bruce Barker story, and
Jeez.
I'm sticking to it.
April 4th, 1985. You're playing a gig with, well, a band called Triumph.
I remember.
You're playing at Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, as a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, what kind of a thrill was it to stand on the stage, but in that shrine that you had watched on Hockey Night in Canada or stands so many years?
I was scared to death. To be honest with you, we were playing with, like, if you remember the time, Triumph were huge, and so it was a big deal for us to do that. And oddly, we had played, as I mentioned earlier, we played a lot of the NHL arenas anyway, but we had yet to play Maple Leaf Gardens, so it was a big deal. And I used to go to the games with my dad. His company had season tickets, so I've been going to games since 71, and so it was a huge deal. And I remember, like most people in Toronto, walking around the gardens and looking at the pictures on the wall and the atmosphere, and so it was great. It was wonderful, and I'm thrilled to be able to play there. I think we did 2 shows with Triumph, and we played there again once, a benefit show with Glass Tiger.
Right. Very good. Very good. Well, I mentioned Triumph a moment ago, and I'm going to bring you back up again, Rik, if you don't mind. Rik, one of the gigs that really broke Triumph wide open happened on March 21st, 1978, when you guys were moved from, as I recall, Massey Hall to play at Maple Leaf Gardens. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, Massey Hall wouldn't let us use any of the flash pots or the flamethrowers because, it's a protected building, and we didn't want to have to do a gig without the, all of our special effects crutches. So we told Michael Cole, look, we want to move up to the concert bowl at Maple Leaf Gardens, and he said, "You're nuts. That can't be done. That's like almost 8,000 seats. No, we're not going to do that." And we said, "If you lose money, we'll write the check." So he went, "Okay, you guys have got huge guts. Let's go for it." So we did, and we sold it out. And Michael gave us all Leafs jerseys when we got back to the dressing room. I had a Boreas Alming jersey, so it was great. Yeah.
Very, very cool. You guys played Maple Leaf Gardens a number of times. As a hockey fan, was there any special thrill in standing on that stage, Rik?
Oh, it was unbelievable. Like, I wrote the thing for you for your book, and so I'm going to cop some of that stuff. But my grandmother had seats. Like my grandfather had passed away, but my grandmother inherited these seats in the North End Blues. And so we would get to go. My dad would take, I had 2 brothers, and so we'd all get turns to get to go maybe a couple of times a season. And so, it was you said the word shrine and stuff, that it was like just this, crazy palace. So it was really something to be able to walk out on the stage in that building and think, man, this place where I came to see, Keon and Armstrong and Johnny Bauer and, all that stuff. And now, here I am, and my name's on the marquee. So it was kind of cool. It was magic. It was special for sure.
I've talked to some people who knew you back in the high school days, and they said that you were A, an outstanding athlete, and B, uber competitive. Were you a hockey player back as a kid, Rik?
I was a little, but not very much. I was much better without skates on. I was a runner. I did track. I was a sprinter. I played baseball and eventually in high school a lot of football. But I did play a couple of years. My dad had been a goalie and had played after sort of Second World War. He played for the Etobicoke Indians. He played junior B. And my younger brother was also a goalie. And so I did a couple of seasons of sort of house league kind of hockey. And I played goal. And but I played later in life for the Rock and Roll All-Stars with Mo was telling us Chicago stories. Andy Curran's a friend of mine, and he dropped by here today, and he dropped off some stuff, and he's a huge Chicago fan, and he was telling me all about going skating out on a pond in Whitby, and he said to say hi to you, Kevin, and he said, hey, he was out skating, and so he sends me a picture on his, from his camera of him skating on this pond in Whitby. Yeah, and I mean, I've got a million hockey stories, and I've been sitting here with everybody else, and I've been making a list. And I have a Lanny McDonald story, I have a Gordie Howe story, I have a Gretzky story, I have a Bobby Orr story, Rick Vide, Ron Ellis, because we used to play the old timers and stuff, and that was part of it. But the story that I want to tell, and I know you're running out of time here. I want to tell this because you got Tara here. I had an unbelievably great night where Ron McLean took my brother. My brother was dying of cancer, and he took my brother and I down to Buffalo so that we could see the afternoon skate, Sabres and the Canadiens. And then my brother got to go into the dressing room and meet Saku Koivu. And that was just an unbelievable, beautiful thing. And Ron set that up, and that's the kind of guy he is. And yeah, so Tara, make sure that you when you see Ron, tell him I said hi. And that was a very, very special thing in my life.
Yeah, I will.
Special story, Rick. Jeez. Pick out one from the ones that you just mentioned, whether it's Lanny or Wayne or Ron Ellis or whoever. Pick one out and share it with us, if you will.
Okay,
Rick.
all right. So first of all, you showed the picture earlier where I'm wearing a Montreal Canadiens thing. My brother had given me that. I hated the Canadiens. He loved them. He worshipped them. And I was a Leafs guy. And so he'd given me that jersey, and it had shrunk so bad that I just cut the sleeves off, and it was like a kid's T-shirt now. So, anyways, yeah. So that's that. No, okay. So, which one will I tell you? I'll tell you the. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the Gordie Howe story. So I did the NHL awards in '87. I gave the Vezina Trophy to Ron Hextall with Lanny McDonald, and I did a gaffe on stage where I got a red mustache and pretended I was coughing, and then turned and faced Lanny, and I had this big red handlebar mustache on, so it was a sight gag for the TV thing. And so afterwards we're at the dinner, the awards dinner banquet, and we're sitting beside, and I'm at a table with the celebrities. So it's like Shannon Tweed, Playboy Bunny is sitting beside me, my wife is on the other side, and she's not too happy about this. So and the little kids, like it's rich people, rich guys that own construction companies in Sudbury or something. They buy the tickets so that they can sit at the table, and then their kids are running around in little tuxedos getting everybody's autograph. At the next table to us is the Howe family, Mark and Marty and Gordie with his wife Colleen. So at a break in the action, I kind of slide all over with my program. I say, Gordie, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. You're dessert or whatever, but could you send this to my dad? Like he just loved it. And Gordie's kind of looking at me sideways. Now, of course, I had hair, stupid hair hanging down, and because of course it was the fashion of the time. And Gordie looks at me and he says, "You don't have to apologize." He says, "I don't mind signing an autograph." And then he starts giving me a lecture like I'm Wayne Gretzky, a little kid, and he's going, "Look, son, well, if somebody ever asks you for a sign an autograph, you should be doing it because they're paying you a huge compliment, and so it's all you should be always doing it. It's a respectful thing." And I'm going, "Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you very much." And he gives me the program. It's like I go, "Well, I just got a lecture from Gordie Howe." It's pretty good, I'm in a Wayne Gretzky league now. So there you go.
I hope you took it to heart, Rick. I'm sure you did. I know you. Very good. Mark Holmes, we talk about playing at Maple Leaf Gardens. You've also played at Maple Leaf Gardens. But before we get to that show, I want to ask you how a boy who grew up in England ends up in Canada and where this passion for hockey was born.
Well, I came along a lot for hockey. I came along later. When we toured, all the hockey players used to come out to the shows because, lots of girls, lots of drinking, lots of having fun. And trust me, hockey players still know how to party. So I became friends with Wayne Gretzky, and we hung out. Unfortunately, my Wayne Gretzky stories are non-disclosure agreement. I can't talk about it, mate. No way. Okay, so I wasn't living in Canada at the time. I was here in '93. I was making a film, and one of the guys, Kim, my friend Kim, massive Leaf fan. You've no idea. This guy lived, breathed it. And the playoffs have just started. Toronto, 1993. So you know what's coming next. I hadn't had a hero, a personal hero in sports since Georgie Best when I was a little kid. And I'd lost that feeling. And then I watched hockey and I started really getting excited. What a great sport this is. What the hell was I before? I know most of these guys, and now I'm finally watching it, especially Wayne. I was so upset with him. But anyway, Doug Gilmour became my hero. I remember hearing stories that he was drafted really far down the way, and he was people say he was too small to play hockey. I'm the same height. I'm 6 foot. He's like 6 feet or 5'9" or something. I don't know. But anyway, he looks the same height as me. He just blew my mind. He carried a team on his back, and that thing where he went from one side and spun around the back of the net and scored that great goal. I just fell in love. I said, I got to know how to play this game. So I learned and I played. It was great. It's one of those things but I knew how to roller skate and shit. So I was really, really natural learning how to skate. And wow, what a great game. And I think one of the things I really loved about it more than anything is the speed you have to go at. And how, for instance, if you're playing football, you're good at a few things. You know, pass the ball, you kick it around, you're running. Yeah, you don't stop a lot. With hockey, not only do you have to be a brilliant skater, you have to know how to handle the puck, and then you have to keep your head up, and then you have to make this decision in a split second as you're moving so quickly. It's amazing. It's an amazing sport. I absolutely adore it.
The picture we just saw was from an event that I oversee called Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer.
Right, yeah.
And I was I didn't know what to expect, because quite often when we have rock musicians come out to be our celebrities, they are good, but not great. But boy, oh boy, you've got some hands. So clearly you are an athlete, or continue to be an athlete. Mark, do you continue to be a big hockey fan? Do you continue to play?
I like team sports. So it's always good to be on a team. Playing football in England is one of my favorite things in the world. It's still my number one sport. Very close to hockey. I think, the next Wayne Gretzky could be living in Africa and has never seen or played hockey. It's just, you just don't know who's going to be very, very natural at something until they try it. Who knows? Like I asked Matt Sundin one time, says, he's from Sweden. What made you choose hockey over football? I mean, both big games, but football obviously is massive, right? And he just said it just had just got on the ice, just had this natural ability. And I think when it came to skating, it seemed kind of natural. And all I did really was, I was good at doing impressions of people. So I was kind of doing an impression of the whole thing. And I really enjoyed playing. And it's really nice, because when I see a sport I really like, I want to learn how to play it. The next one's basketball. Boy, that's not going to be easy. I'm not playing it.
I asked some of the other people on our panel about playing Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, this would have been before 93, clearly. 1984 was the year, New Year's Eve, that you played Maple Leaf Gardens. Yeah. You must have had some sense. First of all, it was the premier rock venue in Canada at the time, maybe in North America in many ways, but also you must have had some idea what it meant to a city, a country, certainly because of the sport. Tell me if it meant anything, or what it meant to you to play Maple Leaf Gardens with Corey Hart and the Spoons on New Year's Eve, 1984.
Wow. I think that was, now we'd already done the show that summer at Nathan Phillips Square. So we knew we could pull the crowd in at that time, and we were very nervous about it. But our guitar player Sergio and Chris, both big Leaf fans, so they're jumping about it, right? I don't know what they were talking about. Anyway, that's the one beside me there. That's Sergio, the one who's with the scarf, with the podcast scarf. Anyway, so we're to go on stage. Now, this is the absolute honest truth. You're not going to believe. So we're in the Leaf dressing room. They're all excited. That's where we know, and setting things. It's at one end of the ring. And our road manager leaves, says, I'll come back to get you 5 minutes before you're ready to go on. So we're in the dressing room. I said, geez, aren't we supposed to go on soon? This, that, and the other. Anyway, we heard our intro tape, like, dun, 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 you know, the big 1 minute grammatical intros. We should step on stage, they go mental. And the door was locked from the outside. We couldn't open it from the inside.
No.
We were locked in the fucking dressing room. What the hell? The music's played. We were already delayed because there were technical difficulties. You know, Spoons had already played and Corey already played, and we're, you know, the big, here we go, New Year's Eve, right? But so it already had to go on stage previous that same. We're having some technical difficulties. I did it because they want the crowd to get too crazy, and you know, it's like midnight. I mean, come on, midnight at a rock concert. That's pretty late, especially since the majority of our audience were, you know, teenagers. So anyway, when I went back in, and I think everything's going to be great, and we're talking, yeah, this is going to be so great. I'm so excited, and yeah, couldn't get out. Thing played. There's somebody banged in. What's going on? We can't get out. And they finally got us out, and we finally made it on stage, and everything went wrong that night. It was the most brutal shows we ever played. But oh yeah, it was dreadful. His echo stuff wasn't working. His pedals weren't working, and by then it wasn't as easy as it is now. But he's got their in-ears. We've got all our amps are virtual. Sorry, Rick. But yes, we use virtual amps. And so there's technology nowadays that makes it a lot easier. But back then, you know, something went wrong.
Oh man!
But I do think of that show often because of all the mental things that went on just before we went on stage. I'm sure Rick and Dave and Tara, they must have some crazy going on stage fiasco moments, but you dream about them more than anything else. I can tell you that.
You know, you just roll with it and you figure it out somehow. Thank you, Mark.
When you have those nightmares, those are the ones.
All these decades later. Tara, you are working breakfast television in Calgary, and then you get a knock on the door, and you get an invitation to co-host Rogers Hometown Hockey with Ron MacLean. How did that come to pass, Tara?
Well, you know, I have to give Michael Landsberg a lot of credit. So Michael, for probably everybody out there knows, hosted Off the Record for many, many years. And at the beginning, Off the Record was really just a mishmash of personalities. It kind of evolved into more sports reporting. But at the time when Joydrop was around, they were always looking for a woman to weigh in on sports and sports issues. And I was a huge hockey fan just from growing up. I watched Hockey Night in Canada with my dad. We were Montreal fans. So, and I loved sports. So I was asked to do Off the Record about 25 times. And in the very early days of web content, I was actually going and doing interviews in the locker room for Off the Record. I was covering the NHL awards. So I had this kind of weird connection to TV broadcasting before it was even a glimmer of what I might end up doing with my life. When I did move into broadcasting, and specifically when I moved to Calgary for breakfast television, City TV is owned by Rogers. Rogers also owns Sportsnet. So I started to kind of angle myself towards sports, and I was doing some junior hockey for Sportsnet. I was doing curling. I was doing bobsleigh. I was kind of doing whatever they would let me do. And I just remember when the press release came across my desk that Rogers had signed this giant NHL deal for 12 years. And they announced that Rogers Hometown Hockey was going to be this traveling hockey show with Ron MacLean at the helm. And I just knew that was for me. I love hockey, but I'm not an analyst, but I love the stories. I love the camaraderie and those aspects of the culture. So I actually wrote a letter to the president of Sportsnet telling him why I felt like I should be a part of it. So the first year, I was actually I had more of a peripheral role. I did about half the shows while still hosting breakfast television, which almost killed me, and was more of a reporter. And then second year, I was made full-time, and I'm beside Ron MacLean at the desk now. So it seems like a crazy trajectory, but I mean, all of these little forks in the road have led me there. And I did steer myself there very much on purpose.
You do a lovely job there. But I have to ask, you certainly, the travel that's involved with a young family, the preparation that's involved. I'm sure you have a team. I know you have a team as well. But can you talk about how that stretches you in every direction to do hometown hockey?
You want me to cry?
Sorry.
No, I mean, no, I'm kidding. I mean, the irony is, part of me hanging up the microphone was the road I found very difficult. We were doing 250 shows a year with Joydrop, and that was very hard for me. And so ironically now I'm, spending 3-4 days a week on the road for half the year, doing hometown hockey. But I'll say that, we have an incredible team of producers and people buy into this so much and believe in this show and this tour to such an extent that it lifts you up at the times when you start to flag. And Ron and I, we take turns, having bad spells, of fatigue and poor mental health. And I think we just have a great support network. And Canada itself, people are so generous with us. They want to share their stories with us. They're happy that we're there. And so I just feel incredibly grateful that people trust us with the lore of their community, to the extent that we can express the heart of their community every weekend to the rest of the country. So yes, it's hard. I don't miss flying. I don't miss driving in rural Saskatchewan right now, but I sure do miss the show and the connection that we've been able to have with people.
Well, it's an extraordinary show, and it's so well done. Through the years, you've interviewed so many people. Some, like you said, are the heartbeat of their community. They'll tug at your heartstrings. Other stories are because they're local heroes and they've played in the National Hockey League or in the Canadian Women's Hockey League, whatever. Are there any particular stories, both on the professional side and on the grassroots side, that stand out for you as being kind of a magical moment during Rogers hometown hockey?
There are a lot. And I've met so many of my NHL heroes. I've met my women's heroes. There's some new heroes in my life, and I've really taken a great deal of joy out of meeting the people like Glenn Hall and Alex Faulkner and Jim Gregory, the real superstars of the earlier game. I think the most special moment that comes to me, we did a show in Enoch Cree Nation, which is just outside of Edmonton. It was the first time we'd been hosted on a First Nation. It was also the first time that we had partnered with APTN to do a simulcast. So it was a Habs Hurricanes broadcast, I'm going to say. And at the same time as we were doing our broadcast in English, it was to be broadcast and doing play-by-play in color in Plains Cree. So this was all it was very, very powerful. And one of our guests on that show was Chief Wilton Littlechild, who he was the Treaty 6 Grand Chief at the time. I mean, he grew up in the residential school system, really credits hockey and sport with sort of saving his life through that period. He's a magical man. And to watch Wilton Littlechild and the people who had hosted us there on Enoch Cree Nation watch the Cree broadcast of the game and listen to the call in their language with tears rolling down their face, I don't think I'll ever experience another moment like that. It was profound and very powerful.
Wow.
Extraordinary. Wow. Talk about powerful now. You've got another show that you're involved with called Top of Her Game, and it's conversations celebrating female athletes and builders as well. Can you tell us about that program as well, Tara?
Sure. My joke is that it took a pandemic to get a show about women in sport off the ground, which I wish that wasn't true, but it kind of is. It took the pause in live sports in the spring to find a home for this. But my employer in Sportsnet, they've been totally behind it. They buy in completely. And, we're just trying to tell these stories and amplify and carve out a space for these incredible women. I think that the tide is changing. This has been 2020 was the Annus Horribilis, but it was also a remarkable year in terms of just our awareness of social and racial justice. And part of that is just a women's place in sport. So I'm still doing the show. There are, so many guests yet to be spoken to. So I feel very, very lucky.
Good. Congratulations. Wonderful stuff. Mark, I'm going to shift it over to you and ask you what you're doing these days as well.
Well, before COVID hit, we got ready to release our new single, new video, and everything. It deals with the opioid addiction. It was actually more of a charity thing, and when the COVID thing hit, it seemed to not be the perfect time to release this. So we've been waiting for a little while till the other conversations can come into view around all the talk of COVID and everything now. So we're waiting for that. So as we're doing that, finishing a record, I've done some more electronic music, thinking of the day, so I'll do some more DJing, get out there. And, scratching and surviving. I've just come up with a new thing for our in-ear monitors. So I've been doing some technical things too. And just looking forward to getting out and playing, getting some songs out there, and producing. I'm learning how to master now as well. So what the heck? Try to do it myself. Yeah.
Good for you, Mark. Well done. A man for all seasons. There we go. Rik Emmett, how about you? You mentioned a poetry book. You're playing a little bit less, writing a whole lot more, and you're a beautiful writer. Talk about what you're doing these days, Rik.
Yeah, I got a book of poetry coming out on ECW first in the fall. It's called Reinvention. And I'm working on a memoir for them. It's a 2-book deal.
Beautiful.
The audio book for the poetry will also have some jazz guitar interludes, and I've been composing little pieces to connect. So, I made a deal with Roundhill Records in the States, and they bought up all my catalog because I didn't want my kids to have to administrate. So,
okay, that makes sense.
Very, very good.
I've lost him. I don't have his.
Me too.
Yeah, me too. So let me move over to Dave Betts. And Dave, first off, a question from Steve Paikin. He wants to know how the former MPP from Stony Creek is doing these days. Dave's married to a former politician who's doing real well as well. Bring us up to speed, if you will.
My wife, Jennifer Mossop, she's doing fine. She's in the other room with our daughter, who is now 17 and a half.
Wow.
So we're doing very well here. I wish I could say I was as busy and successful as Mark and Rik. I love how Rik can freeze frame. Look at that. He's holding that pose perfectly. I know. He's a pro. He's gone now. He leaves. I've insulted him. Honeymoon Suite. I mean, we are putting out. There was a new single put out in the summer. We did a virtual video, but as most of us here can probably relate to, it's difficult for bands that were popular many years ago to get a lot of momentum going. So we're lucky, like Mark. We're doing, the circuit, as I mentioned earlier. So we were busy we played a big rock cruise last February, Monsters of Rock, on a huge cruise ship with like 40 other bands.
What was that like?
It was wild.
Yeah.
It's full of 50 and 60-year-old men with black T-shirts and tattoos, and they're all like, that's sort of what they do for 4 or 5 days. But there's a lot of great acts on these things, from Extreme to Queensryche to all these bands are on this stuff.
Oh my goodness!
And the last year we did was at Casino-Rama. We did that on February the 20th, and that was a wonderful show. And sadly, that was the last one. So we'll get out there. We'll all get out there, and it'll be over soon. And Tara will be back on the planes, and she'll be driving through. Sorry, we'll all be on the planes.
I did want to say one thing, if I may, today.
Go ahead, Mark.
That so far one of my favorite album covers of all.
And now he's pulled a Rik Emmett and he's frozen.
It's Honeymoon Suite. Am I really frozen?
No, not for me.
Not for me.
There we are. Now you're good.
Okay. I just wanted to say how much I love the Honeymoon Suite album cover, the bed with the nails.
All right.
best album cover I've ever seen. Like, it's my top 10 album cover of all time.
Well,
And I
thank you
love
very much. That was, I think it was a guy named Dean Motter who put that together. And I remember we were playing the Uncle Sam's in Niagara Falls, and Bob Roper, our A&R man at the time, brought it in. And we were thrilled because we were afraid it was going to be an easy Canadian cover. And it was very good. So thank you very much.
I hated all our covers. I hated every single one of them. But that one was like the best. Why can't we have a cover like this? Like,
these are great covers.
And then Triumph always had a cool logo at the front. And it was just monster.
Grass is always greener, buddy.
And I'm an adult now. Also, is in my top 20 of all songs. Like, I never say of a Canadian band. When I say I like music, I don't do any disclaimers. But I got to tell you, I'm an adult now. And it's right. That and I think Slone were out at the same time with Underwhelmed.
Underwhelmed, yeah.
Like those that sound, amazing, absolutely amazing. Such a fun.
Well, Mark, you continue to do some really interesting music as well with some other artists who have had a number of hits through the years as well. Tell us about that project and what else you're doing as well, Mo.
Well, yeah, I have a side group with Stephen Page and from Slone and Craig Northey from the Odds, and we played on Tara's show. We're called the Trans Canada Highwaymen. And so, yeah, we had a bunch of shows booked, and obviously COVID has kind of put a brace on that. Pursuit of Happiness had some shows booked as well. Universal Records re-released Love Junk as a kind of double vinyl thing, and they're working on another one for us, which we'll probably put out once things settle down a bit. And then I'm, producing. I have a woman I produce named Serena Haggerty has a single dropping tomorrow, and I have a guy named James Clark Institute who's going to be releasing a record in a couple of months. And so, yeah, there's always something to do.
Very, very good. Well, this has been a terrific program, and I thank our amazing panelists for sharing their time and their memories with us. Although absent right now, Vince Gill was incredible discussing his career, and we enjoyed hearing about hockey in Oklahoma and Nashville as well. And
can we do a what's that show from the 60s called with 6 kids?
The Brady Bunch.
They're all looking down at each other's things as things going on, and they're laughing. There you are. Oh, wrong one side.
Yeah, I look the wrong way.
Now we've lived.
I thank Mo Berg from Pursuit of Happiness and all of his other projects, Dave Betts from Honeymoon Suite, Rik Emmett from so much great music through the years. What a wonderful man. Mark Holmes, and kept keeping us entertained through the years in many different ways. Tara Slone as well, who's helped me so much with Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer as well, and just love watching her on television. What a great job you do there. All sharing these great moments with me and with all of our spectators here as well. I thank you all. I wish you all much continued success, and be safe and take care of yourselves over the next little while. It's been a funky time, but hopefully we can turn a corner in the next little while. I want to thank once again our sponsors who made today possible. Soho Hockey, 100 Things Maple Leaf Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die by Paul Patskow and Mike Leonetti. And Voices in Blue and White, Pride and Passion for the Maple Leafs by myself. Next week, we're going to be talking to Derek Sanderson, so I hope the spectators will join us. That's always going to be a good time. You can only imagine the stories that you're going to hear there. Final thanks to the team that helped us assemble tonight, bringing Hockey Time Machine to life. I want to thank executive producers Paul Patskow and Laura Evans, our technical producer, Glenn Dreyfus, and our assistant producers, Suzanne Primo and Wayne Gillespie. Sorry, lost it there for a second. Wayne Gillespie, for all the things that you brought to the table. Thank all of you so much. Have a great night, everybody. And I hope that we'll see many of you again next week with Hockey Time Machine.
Thanks, guys. I really loved it. Best of
luck.
Good time.
Yeah,
it was great.
Love you all. Take care, guys.
You guys were fabulous. Thanks, everybody.
Kevin, you rock.
I hope it was okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, man.
Take care, everyone.
How do we get out of this fucking thing?